Welcome to Truthscript Tuesday night. It is a wonderful, beautiful summer night. I hope wherever you are, the ladybugs are making their light out there so you can see them. A little muggy where I am, but we got AC, so I don't feel it in here, which is good. We got a couple articles to go over, more than a couple. We have actually four great articles, and one of the reasons we have four and not two or three is because last week the Southern Baptist Convention was going on, and for my other podcast, Conversations That Matter, I was trying to juggle too many things, and it just didn't work out. But that's fine because we're going to go over all four of the articles, stretching back over the last 2 weeks. Just a reminder before we get started, Truthscript is a 501c3. If you want to support the ministry, you can go to truthscript.com. Just scroll to the bottom of the website. There's a little tab there for donate if you like what we're doing, if you like what we're going to do. And I talk about that sometimes. I'll give you a little bit of an update as we go in this podcast. And then, of course, if you want to publish with us, there's a publish tab there too. And you can click on that. It'll give you the guidelines for what we expect. So, we have a lot of great writers that have just kind of been discovered, I guess. They weren't being noticed in broader evangelicalism. Some of these guys, blue collar guys, can really write. And so I'm really thankful. Some of the moms who stay home and watch the kids, there's so much talent out there that I don't think we know about. I remember once, this was years ago, listening to a Paul Washer sermon. He said, the best sermon that's ever been preached, you've never heard it and you never will. And I think he's absolutely right. I don't think it's just the best sermon, probably the top, 1,000 sermons, if not more. You'll never hear them because they probably weren't recorded and they were intended for a specific audience. And so anyway, all that to say, God has his people all over, and there's no small places, no small people. One of the things I do want to mention as far as an update is if you go to the Truthscript website, I should probably just show you this if you're watching. You go to the top, there's a new tab up there that you might not have seen before, and it's the Church Finder tab. If you click on that tab, it gives you a form you can fill out if you would like to enter your church as one of the churches that we include on our Church Finder list. And so it has an input for the website, for your name so you can manage it, for what denomination it is or what theology it is. Now, of course, all these churches do need to meet a baseline. And so this is on an honor system. You need to go to our statement of faith. And again, you can go to truthscript.com, scroll to the bottom. There's an About Us section. If you click on that, it'll bring you right to our statement of faith. There's only 11 points. So it's pretty general here. But there are 2 points that I want to just focus on real quick. And I got some questions about these. One is there is a section on biblical justice, objective truth, social justice. So, what does that mean? Well, it's a pretty general statement, but there's a lot packed into it. So if you are at a church that compromised or is compromising on any of the social justice issues, whether that's LGBT or BLM or Me Too stuff, and they haven't repented of it. The leadership has not repented, or they haven't, let's say, because this is a common scenario, you had a church where leadership kind of went woke in 2020, and they haven't done anything as egregious since then, and maybe some of the leadership has realized that's wrong, but they've never actually owned it. That's probably not a candidate for what we're looking for. We're looking for solid churches. And what we mean by that is solid doctrinally, but also solid in that they have a backbone. The leadership is willing to take stands on these cultural issues that are tearing churches apart. So that's important. And I think that's why people use a tool like this. And it's just one tool among many that are out there, but we think it's a special one. It's a good one. And for those who remember the Discerning Christians website, it's going to be similar to that. Now, the other question I got was about this section on Darwinian evolution. And I think it just says Darwinism. We believe in a grammatical historical approach to Genesis. We reject any attempt to reconcile the creation accounts with Darwinism. So someone did ask me about that. What does that mean? Can you be old Earth? And I know what I believe on that. I believe in a young Earth. I believe that Genesis, I take it in what it says here, grammatical, historical, but if you want to say literal way, that's how I look at it. And what I told the person who asked me that, though, is my opinion is not the thing that matters so much as what does the statement of faith say? And really what it's saying is that Genesis is not just poetry that's meaningless. It means something. It's a narrative. It tells you what happened historically. That's what we're talking about. So that's another issue that's been dividing churches for a long time. And we just thought that was a good thing to take a stand on. Now, one last thing, I want to clarify this, and I think this is going to be brought up at the next board meeting, but there was a church, at least one, that had women pastors that someone signed up on the website. And that is not a candidate for Truthscript, and this would fall under the social justice stuff. I realize now that this is again a big area, and I just said my opinions aren't. They don't matter. It's the statement of faith, and I realize there's some old line Pentecostal churches that have female pastors, but they're pretty solid on these other things, and I get that. I think this language is probably going to be tightened up at some point because of that issue. So we don't want to cause confusion, but we would be complementarian / patriarchal in that world. I would consider myself patriarchal, but we're not. We wouldn't see the office of the pastor as being suited for women because of what Scripture teaches. So I want to just get that out of the way to clarify things. It's no longer an email system. We tried that, and we just got so many people sharing emails. The web designer said, I got to make a form here. So we have a form now. Go to truthscript.com, go to the top, go to the church finder form, and you can use that to give us your church, or if there's another church that fits what we're looking for, then enter them in there as well. And we'd love to populate the map. It's already being populated and should launch pretty soon. So with that, let's get into some of these articles today. And again, I am live streaming. So if anyone has questions, comments, cries of outrage, feel free to put those in the chat box and I will interact with them when I get a chance. So we have an article today. We're going to go in sequential. I pushed the wrong button there. Sorry about that. Here's the right tab here. So we're going to start with something that goes back now a few weeks, but I figured we should highlight it because we haven't talked about it. But it's by Paul Scharf, and it's called When Freedom Scaled the Cliffs. And Paul talks about the D-Day invasion. We just had the 80th anniversary. Can you believe that? The 80th anniversary, and there were still a few vets who were there who remember it. There's not many, but there's still a few, and some news channels are interviewing them. And it's really sad, actually, on social media to see some of these interviews where vets say, I don't recognize the country I fought for. I don't know where I live anymore. It doesn't feel like America to me. And there were a number of those. But at the same time, despite the changes that have happened in the United States, I know that there's still a level of respect, especially for the World War II generation, that I wouldn't say applies to some of the other conflicts we've had since then. There's universal recognition, it seems, that the World War II generation did the right thing. And there's still this level of honor out there, which that might be one of the last things that binds people in the country together, to be quite frank with you. And so it's an important anniversary. I mean, this is one of the last ones. So anyway, in this article, Paul talks about what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said in his radio address on June 6th. And, he uses these comments, these allusions to Christianity, to faith, that you don't hear. Lead them straight and true. Give strength to their arms, stoutness to their hearts, steadfastness in their faith. You wouldn't hear this stuff as much anymore. It says Roosevelt famously distributed New Testaments containing the Psalms to the troops. Did you know that? Operation Overlord, commonly known as D-Day, involved the mobilization of more than 179,000 Allied troops who strategically attacked the beaches of Normandy, France. Give some of the history. The Nazis, had these bunkers, and it was just a very dangerous thing to go up against what the Germans had. And, I lived in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is right near I think it's in Forest, if I'm not mistaken. It's like 2 towns over where the D-Day memorial is, and it's the national memorial. And it's because There were so many men in, I think it was Bedford actually, where it is. There's so many men in Bedford that died in that invasion. And so I've been to it, I think 3 or 4 times. And if you get a chance, it's amazing. But it gives you an idea more of what these guys went through. Different generation, cut from a different cloth. Talks about President Reagan and his dedication. And it was the beginning of the end for the Axis powers. That's why this was a significant day. Reagan summarized all that was at stake. For 4 long years, much of Europe had been under a terrible shadow. Free nations had fallen. Jews cried out in the camps, and millions cried out for liberation. Europe was enslaved, and the world prayed for its rescue. And I really do think this idea, this understanding of what happened in World War II truly bound the nation together. It kept a national identity going through the Cold War. And I think now is when we start to see the cracks. And it's a sad thing to see the World War II generation kind of walk off into the sunset. I probably should be more more positive about this podcast. I can't help but think my grandfather died in January. He was not in that theater. He was in the Pacific Theater. But I just grew up, when I was a little kid, I remember seeing the mothers of World War II vets, Gold Star mothers, lay wreaths at events. And it's surreal to me that time just goes so fast. Anyway, he talks about, let's see, the Friends of Israel ministry, which is who Paul works for. And one of the chaplains at Omaha Beach, George Russell Barber, I think I'm getting that right. Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel George Russell Barber. Barber witnessed the concentration camps in Nordhausen, Germany firsthand and assisted in the establishment of the famous Normandy American Cemetery and died in 2004. He was the final surviving D-Day chaplain. So just think about that. We're in 2024. That was 20 years ago when the last chaplain who participated in D-Day died. Goes through some of the implications of D-Day and the end of the war. And just kind of a good tribute and a throwback to a time that is, I fear, being forgotten. And that will have great impact on this country. Now, let's go to the next article. This is called The Ultimate Terms of Rhetorical Warfare by M.E. Filmer. And this is a very interesting piece to me. This is not the kind of piece that you're going to typically get at other Christian outlets. This is one of the things I think that makes Truthscript truly unique. And so I want to start. The first sentence, you'll realize what I'm saying. Some of you at least. It says, in the Ethics of Rhetoric, Richard Weaver identifies ultimate terms as those expressions to which the populace, in its actual usage and response, appears to attribute the greatest sanction. Now, that is not a sentence you are going to hear. Or a reference to Richard Weaver. You're not going to see this on a lot of Christian websites. But here at Truthscript, we accept Richard Weaver references. I definitely accept Richard Weaver references. And if you haven't read The Ethics of Rhetoric, it is a great book. But he goes on to explain, he says, ultimate terms wield incredible political and social power because they are rhetorical anchor points. They are beyond question. They are the rhetorical absolutes to which the very highest respect is paid. Terms of lesser rhetorical strength are ordered by their relation to our God and devil terms and obtain this lesser strength in reference to these ultimate terms. And of course, if you have been paying attention to the social justice movement at all, and actually, if you pay attention to the abortion abolitionist movement, which we will talk about here soon, they definitely argue in these very absolutist terms. And there is a strength to that rhetoric. Often accompanying ideology, but it's what really religion is often made up of. Ultimate terms, he says, not only reflect the ethos of a given society, but also play a role in molding the society, bringing its members into conformity with that ethos. It is for this reason that ultimate terms are of special concern for Christians because they shape the minds and affections of ourselves and our children. And I've said this for a while. You got to look at the words that are being used by these social justice warriors because they use religious language so often. They use these ultimate terms. They appeal to these ultimate authorities, and it does come into conflict with Christianity. It's not something that you can absorb or sidestep. You can't neutralize this. There is a conflict. You have to recognize it. He says the West today finds itself caught in the rhetorical frame of the left as evidenced by our ultimate terms. Now, listen to this and tell me if this doesn't ring true. Words such as diversity and equality are our God terms, while racism, fascist, or homophobic serve as our devil terms. These terms either emerge or are found new significance during the 20th century, and they are tied to the various social and political revolutions of that era. Like I just said with World War II, the word fascist here, right? This is given such a meaning, and there's so many things that root a negative view of fascism in the American conscience. One of them being that many of our grandfathers and great grandfathers, and now I guess some great great grandfathers, fought against fascists, and so this is the enemy, right, in their experience, and that's been passed down. But it's also been used and reinforced by the left and molded and redefined and applied to other things, so that it becomes an anchor point for building their entire political philosophy and their entire political movement, so they can bludgeon anyone they categorize under these terms. It's very powerful. For decades, American conservatives have tried to operate with the left's rhetorical frame, attempting to adapt and utilize ultimate terms accordingly. Have you seen this where, hey, the left, they're the real Nazis, right? Read Jodan Goldberg's book, Liberal Fascism, right? I used to really like that book, and there's still some good things about it. But, what's the whole rhetorical frame? It's trying to just prove that, look, the left complains about Nazis and fascists, and guess what? They're the Nazis and the fascists, or they're the real racists. So we use that anchor point that they're appealing to, and then try to flip it on them. And I believe that this has been a disaster, to be quite frank with you. I think the results are in, and this has really just infiltrated ourselves because we're adopting the left's frame. And I think that's the point that is being made here, essentially. Conservatives attempt to use the devil terms like racist, fascist, misogynist, or anti-Semite primarily in two ways. Number one, to police the right-wing border of their own movement. This usage is essentially the same as that of the left. Number two, some conservatives attempt to turn these words around and use them against the left, which is what I just talked about. So, yeah, let's gatekeep people that the left thinks are this, and distance ourselves and use those people as human shields to show we're not that. And then let's frame it so that, or try to show that within the left's frame, they're the real ones who violate these standards. How often do you hear about the left's hypocrisy? And you should point that out at times, but that if that's our main complaint about the left, well, they're just hypocrites, then the assumption is, well, their frame is correct, though. Their moral calculations are right. They just don't live up to them. So we live up to them, right? It's like we're the true leftists, if that's true, right? So using the left's devil terms in these ways requires conservatives to affirm fundamental validity of those terms, but also puts conservatives between a rock and a hard place, since these are the very words the left uses to attack them. They need to find some means of justifying the terms while also preventing their use against modern conservatives. As a result, conservatives become preoccupied with the definitions of course, racism is a reprehensible evil, provided we're defining it correctly. They become frustrated when their reasonable efforts to clarify definitions are ignored, and they're shocked when the left uses terms like racism hypocritically or in a way that doesn't seem to comport with the stated meaning. But the dictionary definition of racism is X, they'll say. And the hegemonic left, meaning the left who's in control, which created and owns the terms and has the power to alter it, changes the definition in response, and conservatives feel cheated. They want to use that term too. And so when the left owns the term, I said this about anti-Semitism a while ago on my other podcast. When the left owns the term, they get to massage and change, and it's their term to use however they want. And so if it's anti-Semitism, yeah, sure, they can say that parts of the Bible are anti-Semitic. Why not? Sure, that criticizing Jewish people from a religious perspective is racism, because that is the term that they get to wield as a powerful weapon against their enemies. And when we start reinforcing the power of those terms, we actually give them more power. And then we get frustrated because the terms change or shift, or they're used in ways that we think are hypocritical. And we have to remember, well, it's not really our term. And so that's the point that's being made here. Some conservatives realize the problem with using terms owned by the left, but are still attached to the underlying concept. They attempt to invent their own terms, rough approximations of the original term that they own and can clearly define. Various evangelical leaders, for example, have used ethnic partiality in place of racism. but these terms never achieve the same rhetorical power as the original left-owned terms. It's just so right. And I might have used that term before. I'm not sure. I played around with it. I know in at least in the last year or two, I've been reluctant to even use that. And it's hard to like. Enough about me. Maybe I'll come back to it at the end and tell you how I try to navigate this. But anyway, there are at least two reasons for this. Because the original term is widely accepted and difficult to supplant, and two, because the new term used by conservatives still relies on liberal coded values, which creates tension. You can't outlearn the leftists. Facing reality. The fundamental problem is that conservatives, regardless of whether they realize and admit it, have some form of liberalism as their starting point. Notice that the ultimate terms which have their genesis in 20th century liberalism hold the most sway over conservatives. The mid to late 20th century understanding of racism, for example, is to them objective and factual. It's reasonable position. That's what it is. They've largely absorbed the idea of a general late 20th century consensus that they perceive as neutral and objective, and representing significant progress beyond the ignorant and closed-mindedness of prior eras. This shift in the collective psyche is best understood as a gradual severance from our uniquely Christian and European heritage and traditions. Contemporary conservatives failed to realize that this liberal order was not the destination, but just a short transition period between, sorry, I lost my place. A short transition period leading, rather, to the world we live in today. The end of liberalism is leftism. It was the left of years gone by and gave birth to the left of today. So, rhetorical warfare. If we are to defend the faith of our heritage, Christians and conservatives must summon the force of will to launch a head-on assault on leftism and the liberalism that gave birth to it. No more policing the right-wing border. We must be confidently and unapologetically right-wing. So this is, you can tell this is spicy stuff on the Truthscript website this week. You're not going to find this on even the ones that call themselves conservative, right? They're going to still buy into this more liberal framing, most of those websites. Another reason to support Truthscript, if you agree with this. This definitely requires us to reject both in name and in concept liberal and leftist devil terms. They must be utterly delegitimized. This goes beyond merely pointing out the hypocritical application of the terms. Question them at every opportunity. Demonstrate that they are devoid of any true content. The only purpose of a word like racism is to attack the right. Mock them. Show that these terms are losing their potency by joking about them. Provide opportunities for conservatives to discuss topics that have long been taken off the table by the power of these terms. The ultimate power play is to turn the enemy's God terms into devil terms. Equality, diversity, multiculturalism, pluralism, etc. should all be transformed into devil terms. This must be done gradually and with great caution, and has to be proportionate to the actual power held by the right, or it will certainly backfire, but it is necessary ambition of the ascendant right. So when we're about to get to the last few paragraphs here, but let me explain what I think is going on here. What the author here is arguing, Emmy Filmer, is that essentially the right needs to vilify the left. The left is evil, right? They're against God. They're against Christianity, and they try to take the moral high ground, and we can't let them have it. We have to just take away their ability to use these terms, these devil terms that they own. And so they shouldn't have any power. If someone calls someone a racist, that should mean nothing to us. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't possibly some kind of a sin of and this is how I've phrased it, and maybe this isn't the catchiest thing, but it could be that someone is sinning against someone else and justifying it on the basis of their race. So like legitimately sinning. But here's the thing that's different. That's a sin category in Scripture. If you look in Scripture and you see an actual sin category, that's what you need to vilify or condemn. You need to condemn the sin, right? Not the motive, even the motivation for the sin. You know, that is a means to the evil thing, which is the sin. So this is the struggle. This is the question: is how do we flip it so that the things that the left uses as their God terms, you know, their good moral terms, their ultimate moral terms like diversity and multiculturalism and pluralism, equity, diversity, inclusion. How do we look at those things and then say, you know what, look what they're doing with them. It's evil. vilify that, make that the thing that we're concerned about and prioritize over what the left is so concerned about. And I think what you'll find, so as Christians, we have an ultimate standard to appeal to. I think what you'll find is that the left, since they are against God, they are against what the Word of God teaches, their terms for, their God terms, their good terms, their terms for positive things, those things are actually evil. So this isn't actually a hard thing to do. You can look at something like, let's say, pluralism, right? And say that's evil. Pluralism is evil, and we should be repulsed by it. Pluralism is the kind of thing that happens when you legitimize evil religions that send people to hell. It's the kind of thing that happens when you import people who and allow them to practice things in large numbers that totally contradict our Christian tradition and hurt actual people in the real world, right? That's what you have to, like, images should even come up in your mind when you pluralism and you're thinking, hey, that's the kind of thing terrorists will come in under, right? And the left, it's horrible that you'd say that, because they're going to run to their terms. They're going to say that's racism or something. But that's what has to be done, and it's a hard thing to do. The first few people who start doing that are the ones that are the tip of the sword. But he says that waging rhetorical warfare on leftist ultimate terms, while crucial, is not sufficient. We also need a positive vision with correspondingly God terms that reflect this vision, not a knee-jerk reaction to the left. I think that's great. The enemy's God terms should be turned to devil terms. It must be emphasized that the converse is not true. The enemy's devil terms should not necessarily be turned into God terms, right? So you don't just take fascism and say that's the good thing, right? When the left uses it against us, they're probably going after something that's good, but we don't make that the thing that we revolve our whole political theory around. Devil terms represent your cultural enemy, what you oppose. God terms represent your cultural's positive vision. So by definition, you oppose your enemies, but your enemies must not set the positive vision of your society, even in a negative sense. A culture must have a positive vision, not merely a negative vision of what they oppose. And as Christians, the ultimate source and ground of our positive vision is the Logos, spoken of by John the Apostle, the Word through whom were made all things, who was with God and is God, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That's the ultimate good. We seek to defend and uphold the created order and gifted to us by our great God, and we subject ourselves to the authority of the Scripture. Let us thank God also for our rich heritage, stretching centuries into the past, and seek to preserve the heritage of our posterity. We stand on the shoulders of great men who affirm these same truths, and handing them down to us, we must resist the urge of our anti-culture to be ashamed of our forebears. Instead, let us honor them by following in their footsteps and bring up our children to do likewise. May our God terms reflect and promulgate this positive vision rooted in our faith and heritage: truth, order, tradition, hierarchy, faith, Christian. This is one of my favorite articles we've published. I really, really like this article. So check it out. Share it around, by the way. Share these articles around on social media, because that is how we get the word out about this stuff. Ultimate Terms and Rhetorical Warfare by Emmy Filmer at Truthscript.com. Next is an article about the abolition versus incrementalism debate in anti-abortion circles, why the Christian right loses and how it can win. And I happen to know that the author Jake Lay wrote this after I did a forum, if you want to call it that, or a debate with two gentlemen. One was part of an organization that's anti-abortion, but he's not an abolitionist. He's fine with incrementalism. Obviously would prefer to abolish, but he's willing to take those wins. And then someone who is an abolitionist, who won't accept anything but abolishing abortion now, right? And so those are the bills that he would support. And so they had an exchange. It was respectful. And after that, Jake Lay wrote this article, and I think it's really good. This article is about the conditions that have taken, really the situation since the Dobbs decision, and how many of our national pro-life organizations and politicians, we have found out, are simply using the issue to raise campaign funds for the likelihood of re-election. And I think I realized this fairly recently. I think that I always suspected, and I wasn't surprised, that you have pro-life groups that are, well, let's just say that they really would prefer abortion isn't ended. That doesn't surprise me. But the amount of groups that are like this, that has surprised me. And the thing that really brought that out was the Alabama proposed law to end abortion that a number of pro-life groups, including the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission for the Southern Baptists, decided that they would write letters to try to lobby against. And it was stunning that they did this. But I think a lot of us have realized, oh my goodness, there are some vested interests here. The debate has quickly morphed into a question of how aggressively we attack this evil that plagues our country. While the debate is worth having, semantics can muddy the waters. But a huge issue is this. Incrementalists. Oh, I have got a cat who is, hold on real quick. Could you go out there and just check it out? I'm live right now. Well, my cat is going crazy outside on a live stream here. So I just hurriedly went to my wife, you probably heard me, and tried to see if she could go out there. It's kind of, it is, someone just said, are you really live at 10:25? And yeah, I am. Yeah, it's late right now. So we're not exactly in the preparation mode for going outside and breaking up a cat fight. But anyway, where were we? I'm totally lost my place. This is an interesting episode now. You know, I'm a real person now and not in some studio somewhere. An issue of unity. So, or actually, sorry, before that, incrementalists and abolitionists are now fighting amongst themselves, slinging insults at one another because they disagree on how the argument is framed. Semantics is causing two groups to divide rather than unite around the common end goals both camps have. And I think this is probably true. You to some extent, you know, and you know, if I had more time, I'd talk more about this. But in a sense, everyone that I know who's an quote unquote incrementalist wants to abolish abortion, and everyone I know who's an abolitionist seems to be okay with certain increments. In other words, even if they want to ban it on the state level, their ultimate goal is to ban it nationally. So they're okay with banning it on the state level and building momentum towards the ultimate goal. And I would love to see more cooperation and goodwill, to be honest. I think there is among some, there really is, but I don't know, like, I think one of the problems is from the abolitionist perspective, everyone who's not with them kind of gets put, at least by some voices, in this pro-life category that's compromised. They don't really want abortion to end, which isn't 100% true, right? And then I think for some people on the more incrementalist side, they're so bitter about what some abolitionists have said about them, that influences them against it. And so I realize there's a lot of bad blood, and an article like this probably is not going to be the thing that necessarily ends that. We probably have that debate going on for a while, but I think it makes some good points. So the solution in Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis says, nowadays, most people hardly think of prudence as one of the virtues. In fact, because Christ said we could only get into this world by being like children, many Christians have the idea that provided you are good, it does not matter being a fool. Even Christ himself says that we are to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Again, the actual disagreement is not over either camp's stated goals, but groups want to see abortion ended. The debate is about how to get there. This is where I might provide a surprising recommendation. Take a page out of the leftist playbook, because they often do both at the same time. Take any issue that they care about and think about how they advance it. What do they do? If abstractly abolition is the stated end goal on any issue and incremental is the step in the right direction, they fight tooth and nail for the end goal. Then one of two things happens. Either they completely achieve their goal or they gain an incremental step in that direction. But they immediately, and I've said this before, they begin clamoring for the end goal again. So they get an incremental bill, and then the very next thing is we gotta win. We gotta go to the ultimate goal, which is to end abortion. They do not take a victory lap and try to ride the victory lap to re-election. Instead, they immediately push for their end goal. And that's what needs to happen. So the conclusion here, Jay Clay says, is start local, become familiar with the folks in your local community, and humble yourself and extend grace to others. And so we could use a lot of that. And then finally, there's two articles. I'm not going to read through this one. It's an open letter to rainbow churches. I talked in the last Truthscript Tuesday about Pride Month, but this is a really great thing to share on your social media, because this is an open letter to churches that fly rainbow flags and support LGBT stuff. And if you know people who think you can reconcile Christianity in that, this is a great article by Richard Henry that shows you cannot. And then finally, I call the Visitation ministry. This is a great reminder of the importance of visiting orphans and widows in their distress. And it's often a neglected ministry. For years, I went to a nursing home with my dad to lead a praise and worship service, and hardly anyone would come. It's just not something people do. And when people get old and sick and they go to the hospital, often they're forgotten. And don't forget them. Don't forget them. And I think that's the point of this. Visitation is it is something we're called to do. And there's some good background that Junas Lejanin gives in this particular article, both historically and in the Bible, for the importance of not forgetting about the people who are helpless in that sense and weak and need that encouragement. So I'm sorry to sort of rush through that. I have to go help my wife right now and check out this situation. I don't know what's going on outside. I just heard lots of animal noises a second ago that I don't normally hear in my neck of the woods. But please pray for Truthscript. There's a lot of conversations, even that are going to happen this week, that are going to direct the future of the organization, what kind of conferences we're going to have, all of that. And we could definitely use your support and your prayer. God bless. Have a good night.